Hello and welcome to The Impact. I'm Mike McClanahan. Continuing our coverage related to the landmark February 2021 ruling that turned drug law upside down in Washington, known as the Blake decision, when the state Supreme Court struck down the felony drug possession statute. To recap, the case is named after a Spokane County woman who was convicted of felony possession of a controlled substance after jail employees found a small bag of methamphetamine in the coin pocket of the jeans she was wearing. She argued that she had never used meth and did not know the jeans had drugs in the pocket, adding that a friend had bought the jeans secondhand, then given them to her 2 days earlier. In a 5-4 ruling, a majority of justices threw out her conviction and held the law she was convicted of breaking to be unconstitutional because it did not distinguish between knowing and unintentional drug possession. In striking down the drug law as unconstitutional, everyone previously convicted under the statute can ask that their conviction be thrown out and request a refund for court-imposed fines or fees that they paid. The 2021 court ruling impacts drug possession convictions going back to 1971. People convicted of felony drug possession in that 50-year span may be eligible for having their convictions vacated and their court-imposed fines and fees refunded. Courts estimate up to 200,000 felony drug possession cases and an additional 150,000 misdemeanor marijuana cases may be impacted. The process of getting a conviction varies from county to county. Many locations require people with qualifying convictions to initiate the process. There are instructions and downloadable forms on various county websites. The King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office is proactively reviewing cases to find convictions that qualify, and King County Superior Court will reportedly enter an order to vacate based on the date of the conviction, newest to oldest. People who are incarcerated for drug possession, in addition to other charges, may qualify for resentencing. But that process is a lot more complicated and much less clear-cut. And some counties are only accepting resentencing requests filed by attorneys. The state legislature authorized $47 million to help cover the cost of vacating convictions and resentencing people with multiple convictions. Lawmakers also approved $50 million to go towards refunding court-imposed fines and fees connected to those convictions. Joining me now, Grace O'Connor, managing attorney for the Blake Defense Program with the Office of Public Defense. Thank you for your time, Grace. I've seen estimates from the court system that there are hundreds of thousands of cases that were impacted by the Blake decision and the law which was struck down in 2021. Is the court system able to handle the volume of requests for re-adjudication or vacation that may be coming in related to the Blake decision, or how is all of this affecting the court system?
Yeah, counties and courts are handling it in different ways. In some counties, prosecutors are sort of proactively moving to vacate old convictions on their own. In other counties, the court system waits for the person to come forward. And so I think that, the absorption of the workload kind of depends on the resources available to a county and to the public defense model in that county and the courts and the prosecutors. So that's partly why you see variances, I think, across the state in the way that counties are, to say nothing of municipalities, are reacting to Blake.
From the standpoint of vacating convictions, is that a fairly straightforward process?
For the most part, yes. Sometimes the refund that's associated with the vacate can be somewhat more complicated or tricky, requiring more motions practice from a defense attorney and a prosecutor. But the vacate itself is generally fairly straightforward.
When we talk about resentencing, does that get more complicated, and do plea agreements factor into this sort of thing? What are some of the complications with that?
Yeah, resentencing is definitely more complicated. In Washington, your sentence depends on an offender score that's calculated at the time of your sentencing, that's derived from your prior criminal history. And so for people who are not serving a current sentence because of drug possession, but need to have their offender score recalculated to subtract those prior convictions, that can be tricky if their sentencing range doesn't change. There's recent appellate case law that makes it a little bit harder for those folks to get resentenced, and also plea agreements, as you mentioned, can really complicate things for resentencing as well.
In general, what role do the local prosecutors play in this?
Local prosecutors play a huge role in this. Like I said, some prosecutors are being more proactive about vacating old convictions. When you're talking about resentencing, prosecutors have a lot of discretion about whether they will seek to whether they'll allow resentencing to move forward unopposed, depending on the plea agreement. They have a lot of discretion in the way that resentencing plays out at the local level.
From your perspective, how did the Blake decision impact the lives of people who had simple possession, felony drug convictions on their records?
When you're talking about the population that has served their time and just needs a vacate, it can have a huge effect. A felony on somebody's record can sometimes prevent housing, jobs, even something like going on a field trip with your child. So being able to have those kinds of felonies taken off your record can have a big effect for people. And then, of course, having legal financial obligations that people paid on these unconstitutional convictions refunded to them. For some people, it's been a small amount. For some people, it's been a huge amount, mostly owing to the high interest rate that people paid on LFOs prior to some legislative changes in 2018, I believe. But before that time, people were paying high interest rates on LFOs. And so that's, I think, primarily why you see folks getting back large sums in refunds from time to time.
Just to sort of close us out here, what are the biggest questions you have about the whole process, particularly as it relates to refunds and receiving reimbursement for fines paid from these convictions under the law, which was ruled unconstitutional?
I think just with regard to both vacates and refunds, it's just hard to say when the end of the road is. Again, there's sort of no consistent process across the state, so it's difficult to, pinpoint when the work will be done. So I would say that's sort of the biggest unanswered question right now.
Actually, to tack on one question, if someone has a felony conviction on their record and that is vacated, is that the same as never having had it at all, or are there still some challenges that they may have to run into from time to time?
That's a good question. Theoretically, once their conviction is vacated, it will no longer be shared as part of a background check that different entities can make to the Washington State Patrol. But the fact of a conviction is hard to make it go away entirely. There's third-party record scrapers who may have culled the fact of that conviction prior to the date of Blake, and they may still have that data out there somewhere.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Again, Grace O'Connor, Managing Attorney for the Blake Defense Program with the Office of Public Defense. We appreciate your perspective.
Thank you for having me.
Still ahead, hear about the state's plan to reimburse people for fees and fines connected to the invalidated drug law and the summer launch of an online refund portal.
A lot of the feedback we've heard is to keep it as simple as possible. These folks have already been through a lot.
Stay with us. There are so many drug possession convictions impacted by the Blake decision that state court administrators are setting up an online portal to help navigate the process of getting reimbursed for legal and financial obligations imposed under the now invalidated law. The portal is set to launch this summer. Joining me now, Chris Stanley, CFO of the Administrative Office of the Courts, which is overseeing the Blake Refund Bureau. Chris, thank you for your time today. Let's start with what happens in July.
So in July, we are going to be launching a public portal where folks can search to see if they're eligible for a legal financial obligation reimbursement, what we call an LFO. This is a reimbursement of any fines and fees that they might have paid as part of their sentence. Folks will be able to search that. We'll have court staff and clerks entering information from the court side, certifying who is eligible, and then administrative office of the court staff, Blake Refund Bureau staff, will be able to check to see, okay, someone has applied, we've got a certification from the clerk that they're eligible for a reimbursement, we cut a check. That's the goal.
So how many reimbursements are we talking about here? What ballpark numbers? What do you expect to see?
Well, over 200,000 individuals that we know of having possession convictions. I want to say at least half of that is eligible for a refund.
So how much money are we talking about?
Right now, the legislature has appropriated a little over $51 million for this effort, but there's been some acknowledgement that the work is far greater than that.
Is all of this state money, or is it sort of split between states and counties? How does where does the money come from?
It's all state funds. It's coming from the state general fund.
Oh, and so if you could give me a typical range of fines and fees for a drug possession conviction, felony drug possession conviction, pre-February 2021, what might that look like?
Sure. So someone might have a DNA fee. They might have a blood draw fee. They may have a booking fee. They may have the standard criminal fee and fine that accompanies the possession charge. All of those may have been assessed. Now, the court may have waived some of them at the time of sentence or waived some dependent on a diversion program. Every case is different, but that's typically what we're seeing in the reimbursements.
So are most aspects related to an arrest and conviction that were charged under the law, which has been ruled unconstitutional, eligible for reimbursement? For example, if someone was stopped in a vehicle charged with drug possession, taken to jail, the vehicle's towed, I mean, would that be eligible, the towing fee? Or how far does it go, I guess is what I'm asking.
You know, that's been a question that the legislature tried to answer in the latest budget. And the way they defined it was document verified third-party costs. Those, in my conversations with legislators, were understood to be costs that may have been paid for mandatory therapy or some kind of treatment program that they were required to take as part of the sentence. I can't say for certain what other costs would be part of that. The courts are making that determination in each individual case as the person is petitioning.
How much might court fees be, like an estimate? Does it depend on which county you're in?
It does, you know, and it can vary between $1,000 and $5,000.
I believe in 2018, the legislature adjusted, there was legislation meant to address interest charged on legal financial obligations. How does interest factor into this for people with older convictions?
We haven't seen an instance where a court has ordered interest repaid as part of the reimbursement. So that's not something we've dealt with.
This affected the workload and the case volume overall, and are the courts up to it?
The courts are up to it. It's what we do. But this particular workload has compounded an existing problem where we had a backlog going into the pandemic. That backlog grew extensively during the pandemic, and now this on top of it has just compounded the problem.
By establishing an online refund portal for people to be able to search, is this a first for the state court system?
Yes, yeah, I believe it is. I haven't found any other state even that has been doing something like this.
What do people know, or what do people need to know if they're looking to find out whether or not they qualify for reimbursement? What steps should they follow? Where should they look? When should they start?
So we'll be launching the portal on our website sometime in July, hopefully. As with any IT project, there's always possible delays, but I would say that have patience at first. The data in the system is only as good as what we have in the system. So we're constantly getting data from courts, and that data is being constantly updated because we're finding cases. We're still finding cases. a lot of the work, folks ask me how long this takes, and my typical response is 7 to 10 years, because a lot of the cases that we're going to end up dealing with that will take the longest amount of time are beyond what I call the computerized era, right? Pre-90s. Convictions in the 80s are largely on paper. Clerks are going to have to search their manual files for these. So it's going to take time to get those records into our system and certified that someone's eligible for a reimbursement. So if you believe you're eligible and you check and your name doesn't come up as a result that's found, check back again in a week or a month and be patient. We're constantly getting updated information.
What steps does someone need to follow before they file for reimbursement? Do they need to have paperwork showing that their conviction has been vacated?
They don't. So we're trying to minimize the bureaucracy as much as possible. So when they apply, they'll put their name in, and then we have an identity verification process, typically with some form of state-issued ID that will verify who they are so that we can match them to data that's come in from court staff and county clerks. And if there's a match, we take a look, see what the amount certified by the clerk is, and we cut a check.
Have you heard much feedback in planning for the portal from people that have been impacted by the decision, that were impacted by a conviction from the law that's been ruled unconstitutional since, and the legal financial obligations associated with that? And what sorts of impact stories have you heard?
A lot of the feedback we've heard is to keep it as simple as possible. These folks have already been through a lot. They've already jumped through a lot of hoops in the court system to vacate their conviction and to get the refund of money that's due to them. We want to try to minimize as many hoops as possible because we don't want to re-traumatize people who've already been through the process, maybe multiple times.
For people that were convicted under the now or since unconstitutional law, which have been also charged and convicted with other counts in the same case, does that complicate the process of filing for reimbursement or vacating a conviction when you're talking about someone that just had multiple charges at one time, including one which was connected to the unconstitutional law?
It won't complicate it on our end because we're simply a technical processor. But it will take a little more work at the local court level as courts have to determine what portion of the total legal financial obligation is attached to the unconstitutional charge versus the other charges that someone may have been charged with.
In planning this refund portal, what excites you the most about it? What are you most concerned about?
Well, I would say what excites me the most is being able to have a positive impact on real people. People that have been affected by Blake. I've heard a lot of personal stories. My email address, in fact, is out there, and I often get emails from folks saying, "Can you help me with my reimbursement?" And we'll forward them to the Office of Public Defense helpline, where they can receive more substantial assistance. But that's the most exciting part, being able to help people. The part I'm most concerned about is always IT, right? When you have an IT system, there's always potential for something to go wrong at the last minute, or for a hiccup, or for something to not work, and that can be frustrating for folks. And so that's what keeps me awake at night, is making sure that the portals launch in a timely manner and that they work the way they're intended to.
And who will be processing these claims, the reimbursement claims? Does it vary from place? Is there one location processing all of them, or is it the individual courts? Is it distributed workload?
It varies by court, but as far as processing the actual claims themselves when they come into the refund bureau, we've got a small staff of individuals that will be doing that reimbursement work. If
you look at the overall number of people that have standalone simple possession convictions versus people that maybe have multiple convictions, one of which is simple possession prior to 2021. Do you get a sense that there are more standalone cases or more multiple conviction cases?
I get the sense that there are more multiple conviction cases, but I'm basing that only on the court orders that I've seen come in, where judges have had to parse out the LFO amounts. But that's not a scientific analysis. It's just based on what I've been seeing in the paper.
So the idea that, the clerks at the local level are going to have to dig through the files to try to find the cases which maybe are inquired about, or just to get them into the system. Is that the bulk of the cases?
I hesitate to say yes, but I believe so. I believe that there are a lot of cases where an individual was charged with not only possession but something else as well.
So 50 years of a law on the books, and then the law is struck down, and all of the cases connected to that law may be eligible for to being vacated and reimbursement. Is that a daunting thought?
It is, and part of why there are so many cases is because municipal codes refer, in a lot of instances, they refer directly to the RCW. And so when the RCW was struck down, all these municipal codes were also struck down. And that's where we get the municipal courts involved, is dealing with that cascade reaction of the decision.
So at municipal courts, are we talking about marijuana possession cases that might be impacted too, or are those connected to this?
They are now, that the legislature included those charges in the budget language for what's eligible for vacating and reimbursement.
With respect to the number of cases that have been adjudicated so far, vacating convictions, where are you in the process there, ballpark?
We've got about 60,000 out of a potential 240,000 total. I say potential because, again, before the 90s, a lot of it's we don't know what we don't know. And we're going to end up discovering a fair amount. The 80s were particularly active in drug enforcement. So,
is this something we're going to hear about in the next legislative session, most likely? This is pure speculation, of course.
Yeah, I've had a lot of good conversations with legislators about this. They all understand the problem. They all understand the daunting task that we've got in front of us. I've testified before the legislature a couple of times about it. And I don't feel a lot of resistance to continuing the work, but cost is always an object. And if for whatever reason the revenue situation tightens, then I hesitate to speculate what would happen. But when you're talking tens of millions of dollars, cost is always an object.
We've just got around 30 seconds left. What haven't I asked that you think is important to add?
I think that we're coming at this from a place of compassion for people, and we're trying to design systems that are helpful and easy to utilize and that work for everyone. So again, I would just stress patience from all parties. We're partnering with a number of entities across the spectrum of a non-unified court system, and it's taking all of us to make this work. And so it's a daunting task.
Thank you very much, Chris. A very interesting conversation, and I appreciate your perspective.
You bet.
To recap, once the refund portal is active, it should be accessible through the state court system's website, courts.wa.gov. The exact launch date hasn't been announced, but we're told that is slated to happen at some point in July. Every episode of The Impact is available at tvw.org. There you can also check out the podcast. And be sure to follow us on Twitter @TheImpactTVW for updates about state government news that impacts you. This is the next to last episode before our summer hiatus. Please tune in next Wednesday for more in-depth interviews you won't find anywhere else. For TVW, I'm Mike McClanahan. Take care.